So, yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that, actually I realise it's not in my notes and it's not in Geshe-Tashi's book, but I think it's a helpful idea. So this is what's called the aspect of consciousness. Or can I borrow the orange again?
Have to bring that tomorrow.
Yeah. And this is the difference between the Sautrantika and the Vaibhashika. So the Sautrantika say that for me to see this orange, so here let's just say we're talking about a direct perception for the time being. For me to see this orange, something has to happen to my consciousness. It's what they say is the eye consciousness, when the orange is present, the eye consciousness becomes generated into the aspect of the orange. Okay, so when I look at it, you know, it's like there's something different about my eye consciousness from when I'm not looking at it. Okay, let's say I'm just thinking at a blank white wall, so that's just whiteness, and then I bring the orange in front. My eye consciousness changes, doesn't it? And that change is what enables me to see the orange. So it's kind of like there's an image of the orange in my awareness. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So the Sautrantika say that in a way it's like, although it's called a direct perception, the orange itself isn't in my consciousness. The orange is a physical thing. Consciousness is non-physical. So the orange itself can't be actually in my consciousness as an orange. But there is an image of it, or an appearance of orange in the consciousness. That's what I call the aspect. The Vaibhashikas, they don't agree. Or they say the orange itself appears directly to my consciousness. You understand? Yes, Fiona?
That's how trying to give you image in consciousness. Is that because you've experienced an orange before?
No.
No. Okay.
It's not that. No. So we're talking about the direct perception here.
But
So,
you're calling it an orange only. I'm just calling it an orange, even you know.
well,
Around.
yeah. I mean, that's a difficulty. I have to use language to say. I can't say exactly what is happening in the visual consciousness because there's no language that can do it. Because it is that each moment of that orange is unique, and there's nothing else. So I can't give it a name. What appears to my eye what actually appears to my eye consciousness in a direct perception, I can't give it a name. You see? It makes sense, yeah, because of the fact that it is specifically characterized, because it is just that unique one moment that appears. That's the reality, and then based on that experience, I kind of classify things using my conceptual mind and give them names.
Okay.
Right? But what happens when I see the orange is, according to the way the Sautrantikas explain it, that physical entity, and this is how we normally understand it, isn't it? That physical thing causes some change in my consciousness, yeah, through the mechanism of the eye and the optic nerve and whatever as we would understand it. Then something happens in my consciousness, which is me seeing the orange. So that's kind of what is presented to my mind, is an appearance of orange, right? The aspect is the appearance of orange, or the appearance of whatever it is. I mean, you know, the orange is just a general term that I have to use, but the appearance of something in front of me, this phenomenon, that's the aspect of the consciousness at that moment. Okay? So this is coming back a little bit to Tim's question earlier on. That aspect of the consciousness, the appearance of the orange, isn't itself a mind. Okay, it's the way that the mind is functioning at the time. It's the way you know the how things are appearing to that mind is an aspect of the consciousness. It's not the consciousness itself. So the aspect which is the appearance of the orange is how I cognize the orange.
Are we saying it's a bit like the reflection in the mirror?
It's a bit like that. A bit like that, yeah.
I think Lenin came up with that metaphor for perception.
Lenin?
Yeah.
Oh, really? I don't know very much about Vladimir Lenin's philosophy of perception, but that's really interesting. Lenin was a Sautrantika, okay. Okay. Yeah, so the Vaibhashika, they don't accept that. They say, well, there's just the consciousness, and the consciousness directly sees that physical thing. So you can see that as a debate there. And you can also maybe see that begins to move us towards the mind only, the Chittamatra view. Because then you can question, well, is there an external orange as well as the aspect of appearance of orange to the mind? You can bring that question. You can raise that question.
Can you just repeat that again, please?
Yeah, so the Sautrantika say that aspect of the, in other words, the visual appearance of the orange is caused by the physical orange out there, which then, although it's a physical thing, it has a mental effect.
Okay.
Already there may be some problem there. So the Chittamatrans then, they say, okay, well, we accept that there is this aspect, the inner consciousness is, when I see the orange, my visual consciousness, my eye consciousness is, as they say, generated into the aspect of orange. But where's the evidence that there's a separate thing out there that causes that appearance? All that we ever experience is the appearance, isn't it? The aspect. So they kind of say like that is the orange. They kind of say that. My experience of the orange and the orange itself, I can't get a razor blade between those two things. I conceptually think that they're different, but when you ask me to point to an orange separate from my experience of orange, there's nothing that I can point to. Right? Now, you know, Danny raised a question, well, what about, you know, the effect it has on my body, it nourishes my body? But that's also something in my experience, isn't it? And Tim, you talked about, you know, sort of scientific evidence. But all of those things are perceptions ultimately, aren't they? They're kind of, you know, it all comes back to an experience of a sense consciousness. And then we use conceptual reasoning to construct a story about, you know, a causal process that's happening. But the only thing that we have that gives rise to the thought that there's an external world out there is our sense consciousnesses, our sense experience. Right? So the Chittamatra view is, well, if we can never find this external reality, all we find is the perceptions, well, that's all that there is. Now, how it appears, the aspect, how it appears as an external thing. So the Yogacaras, they don't, the Chittamantrans, they don't argue with that on a conventional view. That is, conventionally it's external. But ultimately, there's no separate entity from my experience that is the external orange. I'm not sure if I've explained that as well as I did in the notes. I'm going to read out the notes in case they're clearer than my verbal explanation. So, okay, non-duality. Yeah. This is the most fundamental idea of the Chittamatra stroke Yogacara school. Common sense tells us that when we see an everyday object such as an apple or an orange, I'll get confused if I keep trying to substitute orange for apples. The apple is something quite separate from and of a different nature to our perception of an apple, right? So normally when I see an apple, I wouldn't think that that's just a perception. And when I talk about my perception of an apple, I think of that as something completely different from an apple, right? Yeah, my experience of seeing an apple isn't an apple, right? A perception is a mental event, a consciousness. It does not have weight, hardness, or other physical properties as the apple itself does. But is common sense correct? Are there two separate phenomena here, an apple and a perception of an apple? When we examine this question, we will begin to see that it is very difficult to separate the two. Although we believe that there is an external apple there, separate from the consciousness that perceives it, it's easy to see that the only evidence we have for the apple's existence is our perception. Where is the apple that is separate from this to be found? All that we can really know directly is that there are mental events that cause us to believe that there are external objects. It is surprisingly difficult to prove that there actually are objects that are truly external to the mind. The conclusion of the Chittamatra school is that this belief is actually a wrong view. The subject, the consciousness, and the object it perceives are not ultimately separate. They are two aspects of the same phenomenon. This does not mean that apples and so forth do not exist at all. Instead, it means that they do not exist in the way that we usually believe them to exist. All of the things we usually say about apples, the apple is on the table, it is red, ripe, medium-sized, and so on, are still valid, but the sense that there is something out there existing completely independently of the mind that perceives it is an illusion. Okay?
Doesn't that apply
That's
to the
in
whole
the
universe and everything and everybody in it?
it applies to the whole external universe.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
definitely.
and all the people in there as well who we encounter day by day.
Yeah.
Just objects.
That's a very interesting question. What about the minds of the other
Exactly,
beings?
Yeah, they have streams of consciousness of their own. Yeah.
Yeah.
You assume, we assume they do, but for the Chittamatra point of view, are they just perceptions that are the same as any other phenomenon? What's the difference?
You know, I really should look into what the Chittamatrans do say about that, because it's one of the most difficult questions you could put to them. Because the problem there is that, you know, it looks as if they're heading towards a position of solipsism. There's only one person, me.
Yeah.
There's only one mind, my mind. And they're probably not going to want to accept that. That conclusion. Yes,
I
Cesare.
think I remember Alan Wallace saying that when one achieves states of concentration,
Yeah.
he's also then able to perceive directly other people's
True.
thoughts and minds.
Yeah.
quite high attainment, isn't it? That one. You have to be a Buddha first to
No, no,
achieve.
that's-
No, you don't.
That's lower than that.
Yeah, much lower, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Clairvoyance of knowing others' minds.
Right.
Okay.
From Shamatha then, presumably.
Yes. Well, it's after you attain shamatha. If you go to the, I think probably just the first concentration level.
So you get those cities, but they're not.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to see perhaps the karma of other people. Perhaps just see
You
that.
can't see everything about others' minds at that level, but you can see their minds. Yeah, you can. You can. So what that is a mental consciousness, directly perceiving another mental consciousness. So that's not dependent on a sense consciousness. So that might be one answer they could give.
Presumably, this is coming from yoga. These are people who are highly realized yogis anyway, who are putting this forward.
The Chittamatra view is very much associated with, we'll talk about that maybe tomorrow, that there is a that's a good way, that's a good answer for them to give. But then of course you could, the same type of argument would apply, isn't it? Because I would then, if I'm, say I have attained that level of concentration and I'm seeing your thoughts directly, so I have a perception of your mind or thought. That's an appearance to my mind of a mind, isn't it? So in the same way, how can I argue that that mind is external and separate from my mind?
It's another phenomenon, isn't it? Only me exists.
Yeah.
What if one of these yogis meets another yogi? Like two mirrors.
Yeah, well, he would be directly perceiving the direct perception of his own mind in the mind of the other yogi. But it would still be, from his perspective, it was hard for him as a Chittamatra to argue that that other yogi's mind exists independently or separately from his own mind. I mean, I think the Prasangika reply to that would be, well, on the ultimate level, nothing exists separately and independently from anything else.
Yeah.
But we're going quite deep there. But what I want to just try to get sort of some sense of. This view is called also the Yogacara view. So Chittamatra means mind only, that's fairly obvious. And it relates to a statement in one of the sutras, actually, that the Buddha said, these three worlds, the desire realm, form realm and formless realm, are mind only. Nothing but mind. And that's accepted, but it's interpreted differently by different schools. But the Chittamatrans, they take that fairly literally, that everything is of the nature of mind. Everything that exists is actually of the nature of mind. The other name, the Yogacara, is given because it's said when the yogi, the advanced level meditator, begins to develop realizations, this is how they experience the world. They experience everything as mind. And I want to try and get some kind of flavor of that. And I think the comparison with dreams is quite good, So if we ask that question, how do I know I'm not dreaming now? How do I know this isn't a dream? Anybody got any answers?
It is I can remember yesterday
Mm-hmm.
or the day before, but when I'm dreaming, well, I don't remember the dreams.
Okay.
I don't know when I'm dreaming. I don't think. Do you know what I mean? So I would know that we have dreams.
Say again, Mel?
Like when I'm dreaming, I don't know that I'm dreaming. I don't think.
Yeah. So how do you know you're not dreaming now?
Yeah.
Because if you were, you wouldn't know that you were dreaming.
Oh, yeah.
Dream particulars are not that I see my hand, I see 6 fingers, and the clock doesn't show the hours and stuff like that.
Okay. Have you ever had a very vivid dream?
Yeah.
Where things are very clear like that?
Sorry, repeat.
A very vivid dream where things are very clear?
Never too much clear.
Okay. But do you think some people do?
Sorry?
Do you think some people do have very clear dreams?
Lucid dream?
Yeah. Or very well. Lucid dream means technically, I mean, maybe you know more than me, but that you know you're dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm talking about is not necessarily that, but dreams where things are very clear. I mean, I've had those.
Real, like
Yeah.
vivid dreams, what felt really real, but actually you've woke up and it's like, oh, that wasn't real.
I
don't know whether it was yesterday or a dream. Do you know when
Yeah.
you dream about something,
Yeah.
like just having a conversation with someone, and I'll wake up and think,
Did that really happen? Or?
yeah, because it was so
Yeah.
ordinary that it might have happened.
I had a dream once. I'll tell you this dream. So I was, it was kind of early in the morning, and I was having a dream, and I woke up.
So you were having a dream
I was having a dream, and I woke up.
on.
And so I was walking around, thinking about this dream that I'd just been having, and quite strange things started to happen. This is amazing. I didn't know this happened in reality. I thought this kind of thing only happened in dreams. I was very clear, that this was really happening. It was very vivid. And I remember it now as clear, really clear. I can still remember, and it was many years ago, this dream was, I can remember it much more clearly than the rest of the things that were happening at that time. And I found that I could actually manifest objects. I mean, I created a chocolate bar, and I was amazed. And I showed it to somebody. I said, this happened, and look, here it is. There's a proof that I really could do this. And that was very vivid. And I don't think that's all that unusual. I think there are people who have more vivid dreams than that.
I once had a dream that I had to do a presentation at work, and I wasn't sure for several days whether. And
there were beads of sweat on your brow.
I was stressed for several days afterwards because I didn't know whether it was real. I really had to prepare for a presentation or not. And the not knowing was perhaps.
So dreams can be very convincing. They can be very clear. They can be very full of detail. Usually they're not. That's true, but still they can be. So how do you know you're not dreaming right now?
I do have lucid dreams quite often, and there comes a point in it where I become very clear that I'm doing it and I'm waking up, and then I'm like kind of going, I want to get back into it because I enjoy making that story up. There's a definite, for me, there's a switch between I'm knowing I'm doing it and I'm in the dream, and oh, look, I've come out of it. And I want to go back in again. So there's a difference in consciousness.
Yeah. So do you get it? How do you know you're not dreaming now?
It's pain. Because if I fall in a dream and I hit the floor, I wake up. If I fall in reality, the floor in it.
I was just about to say that.
There's a
'cause I had
difference
dream.
That's the usual test, isn't it? You pinch yourself.
You can?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine that you could have a dream and you could be wondering whether you were dreaming, and you go, I'm going to pinch myself, and you pinch yourself and it hurts, but the dream continues. Can you imagine that could happen?
Yeah. Well.
It could, couldn't it? So how do you know you're not dreaming right now? Think about it.
We wake up, there's no way to know.
Yeah. And as Chuang Tzu said, how do I know that I'm thinking that I'm a man who dreamt he was a butterfly, but maybe I'm a butterfly who is now dreaming that he is a man.
It could be a long dream, couldn't it?
Yeah. Geshe Tashi told a story, I think possibly when he was teaching this model. I can't remember when it was. I tried to find a recording of it because it really hit me right in the chest. He told this long story about a Tibetan man, and he was living with his wife and they were children, and they were doing these things, and he went off to do something, and all these things happened to him. It's a long story, and he got married and had children, and then the wife died, and all of this happened, and then he woke up. And it was really powerful because you couldn't, you couldn't tell the part of the story that was the real thing from the dream. It was so believable that somebody could have all those experiences and he lived a complete life and then woke up from the dream.
There was a whole series of Dallas like that.
Okay.
Bobby Ewing with the characters. He didn't want to appear.
You're revealing things here to me. How many episodes of Dallas you've actually watched?
We're talking about childhood. I didn't particularly watch this series anyway.
Okay, you've made your excuse.
For the next series, he'd left and he wasn't in it. But then he decided he wanted to come back. So the next series after that, they had a sequence where I think he appeared in the shower and somebody woke up. I didn't actually see it, but they had to pretend that the whole of the previous series was
a dream sequence, yeah.
Because he was now back. He hadn't died after all, and was now back playing the part of Bobby Ewing.
Yeah. So do you get it? That's a really tough, deep question. How do I know I'm not dreaming now? And now you're going to go away and start thinking about this.
But don't watch that.
You don't have to watch Dallas now. That's not required. Not part of the course requirement. So this is, the Yogacara, the Chittamatra, they take this very seriously. I mean, there may be different ways to answer that. How do we know we're not dreaming? But the point behind it is, we think there is this independently existing reality out there. That's happening now, but when we're dreaming, that's not true. And the Yogacaras say, well, find the real difference between a dream experience and an experience of reality. All of the differences that you've mentioned are kind of accidental differences, aren't they? Like if you pinch yourself, you wake up in a dream. But that's not necessarily true. That's not inherent in the nature of what a dream is, that has to be the case. You could well imagine that you could have a dream and still be able to pinch yourself, So all of the things that you said are just like, they happen to be true of most dreams. But what the Chittamatran philosophers are asking is, what is there essential about the nature of a dream that tells you that that's not real, and what is there essential about the nature of your experience right now that proves to you that there is something independent of your mind? And the answer is, they say, you can't find it. What are you going to say, Mel?
Like, we think that this is, the way things exist. So if you're dreaming, we believe that's real at the time.
Yes, exactly.
So how do we know it isn't real, even though we wake up? Is it actually really? Because we really, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think probably, probably the best answer you can give is, well, what we call reality, it kind of hangs together in a certain way. Things logically, causes and effects relate to each other and so on, and it has a certain structure and.
Bad things are happening to us.
It's coherent, if you like.
Is that still like karma having a result on us, even though it's not in reality? Do you know what I mean? So, like, we might be having a bad dream.
Yeah.
So, is that karma playing out? We still.
This is exactly what the Yogacara philosophers would say. Everything is karma. The experiences that you have now are the result of your past karma, right? Everything you're experiencing now is a result of your past karma. So the Sautrantikas have to give some story about how this external reality has to correlate with the karma that's in your mental continuum. Where the Yogacaras, they just say, well, all of this experience of reality, what we think is external reality, is just that internal process of the karma ripening on your mind stream. Yeah? So,
what do you say, internal and external? Where is the difference? If it is just everything mind between?
There isn't really they say there isn't a fundamental difference. There is a difference between dreaming and waking awareness, but it's not a fundamental difference.
If this were a dream, though, wouldn't I be able to have some control of my dreams and dream that I was perhaps richer, more attractive, stronger and younger?
Yeah, absolutely. If you are, unless you are under the influence of, past karma and ignorance, because whether you're dreaming or not, you as ordinary beings, we don't have as much control as we would like, even if we don't have a control, for instance, of like our own emotional reaction to a situation.
True.
Now, there's nothing external that's forcing that. It's just can't really drive my mind all that well, I'm still a learner. I don't have all that much control of what I experience in any aspect of my experience. But according to the Yoga chart, and this is very much, the yogi's experience, someone who has high realizations, they can, a yogi, a highly realized yogi, they can manifest a bar of chocolate, no problem.
They can, in reality.
Yeah, they can.
Chandra Kirti is supposed to have milked a painted
Picture of a cow, yeah. There's a lot of stories like that, yeah.
They have to,
so they experience the non-duality of consciousness and their environment, if you like. So because they do have very, very highly developed control of their mind, they can change their environment, they can change their experience, they can.
This is the phenomenon of perhaps people, yogis making footprints in rocks, etc.
Yeah, all those things, yeah. Sorry, what was your question, Dawa?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Didn't I hear somewhere before? I don't know if I might have made it up and I don't know where I heard it from, but something about if the mind can conceive it, it can really, whatever, like, be a thing. Or something, yeah. So like with Tim, when he said with his dream, what did he say about dreaming a rabbit with horns or something? What did he say?
The horns of a rabbit, whether it was a valid
so
cognition
he
or
thought
not.
that, so maybe that could exist somewhere. So like,
Yeah.
I remember now. If they have to obey to the yogis, to the laws of cause and effect.
Yes.
So how can they manifest a bar of chocolate? What is the cause of it? It requires a physical cause, right?
I don't know how it works physically. We may or may not accept that this is possible, but in terms of the philosophy, since they are saying that everything is fundamentally of the nature of mind, then they would say, they would have to say, I guess, that those physical laws, that's just what normally happens if you have ordinary karma. But if you have the ability to control, on a deep level, your mind, you're not limited by those laws.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a very interesting debate, I think. And whether we can take this claim seriously or not.
With other things, couldn't you? Like enlightenment or whatever, because we haven't experienced it. Because we haven't got them deep.
Yeah. Certainly someone who is fully enlightened is not limited in a lot of the ways that we're limited, which as far as we're concerned, those limitations are like laws that we can't break. But because they have high realizations, they are not, like a fully enlightened being is not subject to karma. The karma only has power over us because we have, we're still unenlightened. We still have ignorance.
what would they perceive then? 'Cause presumably for us, from the just a matter of view, what we perceive is something that comes from the mixture of the karmic seed, which brings forth the mind and the external, or perception of the external object.
Yes.
If there is no karma, what does the Buddha perceive?
Everything.
Everything. Even for the the Chittamacha would have them perceiving everything, even though there's no karmic seed for anything to arise.
Well, when they have no karma, they're free of karma.
They're free. They're no longer
free of karma.
Yeah.
They're no longer bound by karma. It's not that there's no cause for their experience, but their experience. They experience everything, all existent phenomenon simultaneously. So you can't really say that they're not victims of karma in the way that we are.
No, indeed. I was just wondering sort of how for them that would, from the Chittamacha point of view, how the Buddha's experience would be explained.
It's very difficult to explain the Buddha's experience, but I don't know, Tim. I mean, the Chittamachans would say that the reason we're not omniscient is because we still have the obstructions to omniscience, which are the predispositions to see a duality between the subject and object. When that is overcome and you don't see any duality between subject and object, when you completely overcome that duality, then the mind and the object, all objects are perceived necessarily by that mind that is completely non-dual.
What if the object is somebody else's mind?
Well, it's only on the conventional level that there's such a thing as somebody else's mind.
Right.
So, the Buddhists do perceive conventional and ultimate phenomena simultaneously, but that mind is, for them, it's not ultimately separate from their mind.
Yeah, that's the implication.
Yeah,
there's
nothing is separate from a Buddha's mind.
Yeah.
It's deep. It's when we start talking about the consciousness of a Buddha, it gets very deep. Very deep. Yes, Fiona.
How do you know
Yeah.
this is a dream?
Yeah.
Well, in our dreams, we were much freer to kind of imagine, things like imaginary things, like rabbit with horns,
Yeah.
etc. So can't do that in this world.
Well, unless it's a lucid dream, in a dream you're not controlling what appears in the dream, are you? It just appears.
Okay.
So, why is it that we can only perceive the things that we do perceive in this what we think is a waking consciousness? That's because of our karma. And it's the same in the dream. Whatever you experience in your dream, you're experiencing that because of karmic seeds that are ripening, into that experience.
So could you say that using your imagination as a human being in this realm is like kind of lucid dreaming? You're taking charge. You're aware that your perception is.
I mean, this is how Tantra works. So right now, if I imagine Buddha in front of me, my ability to create a Buddha with my mind is very weak. So I just see a very kind of fuzzy image, and I don't have a very strong conviction that it's a real Buddha. But if I practice over many years, that image becomes much clearer. I can see more details. It becomes more vivid. My conviction that it is a valid basis of imputation of Buddha can increase, And at some point, exactly what happened to Lama Tsongkhapa when he did a meditation retreat on Manjushri, after some time in a cave, special blessed cave where there was a very blessed image of Manjushri, and the tanka, the painting, began to give him teachings. Yeah? So in that sort of way, if we practice, we can gain control of our experience, even on the level of waking consciousness. You know, that's what the Yogacara kind of is very much saying, that the power of meditation, the power of, you know, when we start to learn to be able to control our mind on a deep level, we have much more control. We're not at the mercy of the karmic imprints that just ripen without us having any control over it. We start to gain control, and ultimately as a Buddha we have complete control of our experience.
A bit like a Sangha seeing Maitreya then.
Well, that was another case, yeah. So our Sangha did a retreat, and our Sangha is the main figure behind the Chittamatra. By the way, he was the founder of the Chittamatra school, really, and he had great devotion to Maitreya Buddha, and he went, you know, into a cave up a mountain, and did a 3-year retreat on Maitreya. And at the end of that, he'd gained no realizations, and he became very discouraged, and he came down off the mountain. And he saw, I mean, this happened several times, just with shortened version. He saw somebody who was polishing a cloth, a rock with a cloth, just brushing it with this cloth. And next to him there was a big pile of stone needles. And he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm making needles with this cloth." And this inspired our Sangha to, you know, he saw the unbelievable perseverance of this man. I shouldn't be so wimpy. I better go back and try again. So he practiced for another 3 years, and still no result. Came to discussion. Came back down the mountain, saw another kind of sight like this, and it inspired him to go back. So this happened 3 times. After 12 years, he still had no realizations. So finally he said, "I'm giving up. This is no good. I'm getting nowhere." Came down off the mountain, and at the bottom of the mountain he saw a half-dead dog that had been attacked by something, and its guts were all spilling out. And he was overwhelmed with compassion, and he bent down to pick the dog up, and he saw that on the entrails of the dog there were the maggots that were feeding on it. And so such was his compassion that he didn't want to hurt the maggots, so he picked them off with his tongue so that he wouldn't crush them. And then just as he was doing so, the dog suddenly transformed into Maitreya. and our Sangha said, "Where have you been all this time?" I've been 12 years, I've been meditating. And Maitreya said, "I was there all the time, but you couldn't see me because of your karmic obstruction." So Maitreya told our Sangha to lift him onto his shoulders, and he went into the town carrying Maitreya on his shoulders, and nobody could see him apart from one person who had very special karma who could see a half-dead dog. So, so that's the story. So Maitreya, our Sangha, the main works that he wrote are not given his name. They are said to be authored, written by Maitreya, because Maitreya supposedly dictated these texts to our Sangha. So that's a very good example of the, you know, the Yogacara idea that reality is how we perceive it. Can't be anything else. Okay. So, a little bit of time for a few questions. Or how you're stunned into silence.
Maybe I'm asking you a question, but you haven't got the karma to perceive it.
Very good, Tim.
Where does it fit?
Yes, yeah, sorry.
I was, you know, deluded and thought I was a Buddha. I was going to become a Buddha, and I'm not because I can't perform some of a Buddha. So, but I believe I am, like, you know, just in the context of what you said there. Sorry, it's not really a question as such. It's just, where does that fit in? That this general discussion about, what is reality then?
Yeah. So again, I think it comes back to what I was saying before about the valid cognition. That if it's contradicted by something else, you see. So if I think that I'm a Buddha, but then I fall down and hurt myself and I don't like it, I realize that I'm an ordinary being after all. But if I think that I'm a Buddha, that could be a valid cognition. I could suddenly have a flash of insight and think, I'm a Buddha. Because what is a Buddha? A Buddha is someone who sees the nature of his or her own mind correctly, clearly. Nothing else. So it's not like, we tend to have the idea that I have to go out there and get something, enlightenment. But that's not the way it is. Enlightenment is just seeing yourself as you really are. That can happen at any moment. So in a way, if you suddenly thought, I'm a Buddha, you could be right. And then everything would then change. But there's not. I mean, we have this, especially in the Tibetan tradition, this very complicated sort of system of we have to go here and we have to go through these 9 stages of tranquil abiding, and then through the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, then the 10 grounds of the Bodhisattva and all of that. But all of that is just kind of laying the groundwork for the mind having a certain insight, actually seeing its own nature. And actually that can happen at any moment.
That sounds like a Shenton point of view.
I don't think it's necessarily Shenton.
Yeah.
Why?
It seems that, perceiving yourself as having the Buddha nature, say, without just realising you're a Buddha, without perhaps working on it.
I don't see that it's necessarily a Shenton view. Those who don't know, by the way, there's this big debate in the Tibetan tradition between Rentong view is the one that our tradition tends to accept, which is that emptiness just means that all phenomena don't have inherent existence. So there's nothing that exists ultimately. Even emptiness itself only exists conventionally. Emptiness itself is empty of inherent existence. And particularly the mind that sees emptiness is empty of inherent existence. The Shenton view is that there is something that is ultimately existent, ultimate truth, which is not any of the phenomena that we normally know about. Ultimate truth is empty of... Rentong means empty of self. Shenton means empty of other. So they say emptiness means that this ultimate reality is empty of anything else. And it is associated with the view that the Buddha nature, that we all have Buddha nature, that the interpretation of that we are already enlightened, but our enlightened mind is obscured by ignorance. So the enlightened mind is already there underneath. That might sort of Yeah, I don't see that there's necessarily any connection between that and the view of sudden enlightenment, which is the view that anybody in principle could at any moment could see their Buddha nature, could realize their Buddha nature, because that is the nature that we have. So whether you're Rentong or Shentong, it's just, you know, Rentong view might be more associated with the gradual
you've got
idea.
The abiding Buddha nature, but also the developmental Buddha nature as well. And presumably you have to develop that to a certain extent.
Well, from the Rentong point of view, the Buddha nature is just the emptiness of inherent existence of the mind, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
that's the thing, the naturally abiding Buddha nature, as opposed to the developmental one.
There's a separate debate, though, isn't it, to whether it's gradual or sudden. And I mean, there are a lot of accounts of people having attained enlightenment very suddenly.
Yeah.
If you adhere to the gradual enlightenment view, then you would have to say they went in successive moments through all of the 10 bodhisattva grounds or whatever. You know, it's like in a finger snap. But it wasn't in instant. Well, that's a bit of an academic debate, I think. But it's certainly true that although those stages don't necessarily happen at the same rate for everybody.
Zen also have a difference on this as well.
Zen, they had a big debate on that, and the mainstream Zen tradition is very committed to the sudden enlightenment view. That was the one that generally prevailed. But certainly, I think what's true is that enlightenment is nothing other than seeing your own nature precisely as it is. If you see your own, whether you have a Shentong or Rentong view of what that nature is, seeing it is what is the difference between a Buddha and an ordinary being. So, there's a debate about whether that can happen in a finger snap or whether it, but again, Tantra is very much based on by viewing yourself as a Buddha, you become a Buddha. And in a way, I think, whether it's Rentong or Shentong, you could say, by viewing yourself as a Buddha, you realize that that's what you are. As soon as you realize it, you are. So there's not so much difference between those as sometimes it appears. Anyway. Okay, any more burning questions before we...
It's not really a question, but I'm just thinking about dreams. Not about dreams, but like, is it an important thing or a significant thing also? So I'm just thinking about, like, in India when they said sleep with the kusha grass under you. What did he say? Remember your dreams or think your dreams. So why was that so? Do you know what I mean? Like a dream, do they mean something?
Yes, sometimes they do have a lot of meaning. Yeah.
So, but like, I'm just thinking, why did he say that? Sleep with the grass under and think of your dreams. Is that for people who can control the dreams, or?
No, not necessarily. No. This is something that happens in tantric initiation. The night before the initiation, they give out the pieces of 2 types of grass, and you put them under your mattress, and you try to have a positive thought before you go to sleep, and you try to remember, don't you? Well, on the first moment you wake up, you have to remember the colour and things like that. So they put some emphasis on what the dream you have the night before the initiation. It does have a meaning. So dreams can have a karmic significance. They can tell you something about what may happen in the future, or they can reveal something that's happened in the past. Dreams have a lot of meaning. And also there is in the Tantra, there is the dream yoga. So you actually practice lucid dreaming, and you practice, you know, visualization in the dream state, and so on. They have a lot of meaning.
I don't know, I'm just trying to get it in my head. I don't know about dreams.
Yeah.
What that
So there's a book by the Dalai Lama called Sleeping, Dreaming and Dying. Might be interested to have a look at that. There's a bit about it. Okay, I think we'll stop there. And we'll do some meditation.